All right, that's enough.
That was 15 seconds. I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah,
I
that's
held
fine.
my, I held my breath and everything.
You held your breath for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All
All
right.
right.
You want to clap?
You're ready
In
for the
3,
clap.
2, 1, clap. There you go.
I like it.
Dope.
Does it actually? Is it helpful at all?
Super.
You know?
Incredibly.
All right. Cool.
It just sets up the timing for it.
Oh man, I'm here. I'm here for this one. This one's exciting.
Oh, this is gonna be
We're finally delving into fuck the government, huh?
It didn't take very long, did it?
Nah,
Good Lord.
nah. It wasn't gonna take long with us. Let's be honest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Barkin Boys podcast. Today, we are discussing Waco and the events leading up to it, as well as the raid of the compound and the ATF and everything in between. So, this is going to be a doozy. Wear your seatbelts for this one.
It's gonna need more than a seatbelt for this one.
So, guys, imagine that you are in the 1920s.
Okay.
Insert Victor Hotef from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So,
Damn,
this
you went
dude-
that far back. I'm fucking here. All right, sorry. Continue.
So, this dude, he had issues with belief that the church was describing, especially in certain books with Revelations and the coming of Jesus. As said in Revelations, and what most people believed in the first part was Jesus came to earth and takes the believers in God back to heaven with him. But Victor took it a step further and wanted to determine the actual figures who were mentioned in Revelations. He wanted specifics. He wanted to determine the identities of the figures mentioned, and he prepped for Christ to return. And he started a manuscript of all of these ideas and things that he's telling these people in the higher-ups of the church, listen to me, this is what's going to happen, what we need to do to further our faith. And he called this manuscript the Shepherd's Rod in regard to those beliefs. He berated the leaders of the church to what he believed, and they ended up disfellowshipping him from the church in the 1930s because they were, fucking like, hey, we're done. We're not, you can't be doing this. You're going against what we believe in. However, he had enough people who believed with him to join him. He had swayed a bunch of people whenever he had been disbarred from the church, and he formed his own religion of the offshoot called the Shepherd's Rod. It was organized in the 34 and began calling themselves the Davidians from that on. In the Old Testament, King David is mentioned as a righteous king, and his offspring would inherit the earth, and Victor and his followers believed they were that offspring, so they called themselves the Davidians. They purchased a property in 1935, now named Mount Carmel in Waco, or just outside of Waco. The compound started with about 125 people at Mount Carmel, but they grew rapidly by the 1950s to the point of 100,000 people, even though not all of them were living in the property. They were around the region of, they were still Davidian, part of the Davidian religion of over 100,000 people. So it was all going fine so far until about 1946. Benjamin Roden, he had a very unique and steadfast approach when interpreting scripture, and he joined this cult, you can call it. People, the Davidians, started following his teachings, meaning Roden's teachings. Victor ended up dying in 55. After this point, this is when things kind of start to get shitty and crumble. Victor's wife, Florence, took over. Benjamin and Florence hated each other. Their views differed on the scripture. Benjamin still believed in the apocalyptic ideas that they both had for, the Davidians and Revelations and all that stuff, apocalypse type stuff. But the scripture itself, he was described it as more malleable and subject to change. And he said that this interpretation was given to him by God, or the branch, reference to the Old Testament. And these followers started to refer to themselves as Branch Davidians. So this is the beginning of the whole Branch Davidian cult, which is an offshoot of the original, what are they called? The Shepherd's Rod and the original Davidians.
I thought they were called Seventh-day Adventists.
Huh?
It's all right. I said I thought they were called Seventh-day Evangelists, but no, I think
That was the original church that Victor Hotef came from.
Oh, okay.
And then he's like, hey, you guys are kind of wrong. Here's what I believe and what's right. And they're like, no, fuck you, scram, right? So they named themselves as the Branch Davidians. Whenever Florence stepped up, the wife, Benjamin and his followers ended up leaving. In April 59, Florence received revelations from God that the world would end in April of 1959. And her followers believed her. They all met at Mount Carmel. And of course, the world didn't end. And then it started to breed distrust and fracturing among the group. And Florence started to lose power. But after this, Benjamin took this opportunity. He stepped in and purchased the property of Mount Carmel for the now Branch Davidians. And at this point, there were much less than originally mentioned, one of the 100,000 fucking devout Davidians around. Maybe there was about 100 people living at the compound. Benjamin ended up dying in 1978, and of course his wife took over. Her name was Lois. Lois. The cult ran normally for a little bit. Vernon Howell ended up joining the Davidians later on. He became very close with Lois. This is where things start to get interesting. He claimed he had his own revelation from God regarding the means of Scripture, and the two of them became very close, to the point of an affair when she was in her late 60s and he was in his early 20s. Not great. This was one of Vernon's revelations, and he said that their child would be the chosen son of God.
Oh my God.
Lois she ended up having a son. Her son, George Roden, was born, and he despised Vernon. He described it as Vernon had bizarre teachings, even by cult standards, and also the affair with his mom didn't help anything. People started to lose faith in Lois because, first of all, she had a fucking affair, and that she's kind of, letting that shit slide. So the problem came when her son George ended up taking over because Lois started falling out of favor. George's first decree was to remove Vernon from his place of power. The problem was that Lois allowed Vernon to do his own teachings beside the teachings that she would give, and Vernon started to garner another following. George, being terrified that the same shit that happened to his father would happen to him, was fearful of this. And so George and his followers forced Vernon and his followers off the property by gunpoint.
Nice.
Then Mount Carmel was now renamed to Ronanville. Self-named. Incredible. Doing great job, boys. The Vernon and the followers would still squabble for a few years, even though the Vernon and his followers fucked off and lived on the other side of town, and they would, every so often they would get into arguments and scuffles. And it came to a head when George dug up a corpse of a Davidian after about being 20 years dead, and he challenged Vernon to a competition for who can raise the dead. George would say later he was just moving the body for whatever reason, and Vernon contacted the cops, but they didn't have enough physical evidence, and so that was a disaster in itself and really fucked with their mental state. Lois Roden died in 86, and in 87, Vernon and the followers, armed with rifles, broke into the compounds to find evidence regarding the defiled body, so they can get proof for the cops so they can get this fucker arrested. They were spotted by George, had a gunfight. No one was killed, but Vernon was shot. Vernon and his men were acquitted. However, George was held in contempt of court. It's funny because Vernon, he was seen as such a likable and approachable man and so kind and charismatic that afterwards he invited the prosecution to his place for ice cream.
Yeah, the dude was like, "Hey, you know what?
Yeah, it's okay. Water under the bridge.
Fight, let's go back to my place. I got ice cream."
So
Chocolate
George,
chip.
on the other hand, was held in contempt because he said such terrible things to the judge and the legal teams that they considered it a threat and indecency. After getting out, George's followers had converted to Vernon's teachings, and this kind of broke George. one of George's followers, to a point where one of George's followers approached George saying he has a revelation from God. And George ended up killing him with an axe because he was convinced it was Vernon trying to get at him. And George went to jail for murder. Vernon now became the unchallenged leader of the newly named Branch Davidians, who is an offshoot of the original Branch Davidians, who is now the third degrees of separation from the original Davidians. Vernon then renames himself as David Koresh. David coming from the King David, and Koresh being the Hebrew pronunciation of King Siri the Great, who freed the children of Israel. David started his own interpretation of the book. It's mentioned in the book of Lamb of God returning to earth. David's interpretation is that Christ is separate from Jesus, and Christ is not exclusive to the Son of God, but is a name given to any sons of God, who is his prophecy and who carries his prophecy and message. David told his followers that they would all fight the armies of Babylon or fight the evil of earth, and David believed himself to be one of the Christs, and more specifically, the Lamb of God mentioned in Revelations. And this is where it landed from here to the Branch Davidians and David Koresh and...
All right, so David Koresh, this guy, he was a Chad. We're gonna put it out there that this dude.
Yeah, I mean that's an understatement, though, right?
No, that's an understatement. Okay, so in the town of Waco, it was crazy that this group wasn't violent in the least. It was known that so everybody inside the compound of Mount Carmel. They could go out and do whatever they wanted. They could go out and they had jobs outside. They could go out and they could go to bars and stuff. And David himself had his own rock band that would go to bars and play 90s grunge music. Like, a motherfucker was playing Nirvana at bars.
He probably played Kurt Cobain covers.
I really hope there was, But still, there's videos of him singing, hardcore grunge music and stuff. So they were loved throughout the town. Well, I mean, they had a good relationship with the townspeople. There was multiple nights where they would hold like movie nights at Mount Carmel, and they'd invite everybody to come over. Hey, come join in on a movie. It was very like oddly open. So it was like different than all the other cults previous, because all the other cults were like, very secluded, and, you could only do so much to get in, you couldn't get out, and stuff like that. That's whenever, and also David met a woman. Well, I guess you could call her a woman. She was 14. And in the state of Texas, if you give permission to marry at the age of 14, you have to get permission by the parents, which he was given permission by the parents to marry this woman. He married and whatnot, and she got pregnant. Fucking weird. But anyways, so, he was genuinely liked, but there was a couple instances that were tipped off to the ATF, or the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Like an incident where there was one night they were firing their firearms because they believed heavily in the Second Amendment and the right to defend yourself, which, is fine, They started firing their guns at night, and a neighbor called in and said, hey, they're firing automatic weapons on their property, for which the sheriff showed up, and turns out they were just firing their rifles just really fast. The dude had a trigger finger on him.
Jesus.
And so they, no one was arrested. The sheriff left, and he was like, all right, yeah, this dude is just firing a rifle fast. Well, the ATF finally got involved because one of the individuals inside of Mount Carmel decided that he was going to start his own weapons manufacturing deal. I forgot the name of it. I'll have to pull it up here in a minute. But they ordered in a whole bunch of rifle parts and whatnot, because they were going to put rifles together and sell them at gun shows. in which they went through every single legal loophole to do this correctly. They got their FFL, which is the firearms license, in order to be able to sell firearms correctly and whatnot. So they went through with that. But the ETF didn't like this, so they got involved, of course, which was weird that the ATF gets involved, but whatever. So the ATF's idea was like, I have an idea. Let's send in people that are just disguised as college students, 40 and 50-year-old guys that were disguised as college students. And
so
the main investigator, I forget his first name. His last name is Rodriguez. Actually, he says that he infiltrated the cult and got involved, in which he went to a couple of their the sermons or whatever, and whenever he went into the building, because the cult was extremely open to letting people in and letting him see everything, he found several parts to AR-15s, which was legal because they were building AR-15s to sell, and AK-47s and dummy grenades. Dummy grenades are grenades that are just basically hollowed out at the bottom, and they have no black powder or anything in them, and whatnot. So, these ATF agents show up, and they're supposed to be college students. Well, they roll into town, using brand new at the time vehicles, all same paint, same make, and so they knew that these guys weren't actually college students, because they didn't go to college, they didn't have a place, they didn't have jobs, they didn't contribute to the community at all. And so David Koresh figured out that Rodriguez was an ATF agent, but he didn't do anything about it. He was like, fine, whatever. You do what you need to do. I'm open about it. You can see all the firearms that I'm doing, and you're more than welcome to look at it, too. Well, Rodriguez goes back and he reports his findings to the ATF. He's like, they have blocks of aluminum. They have AR-15 lower receivers, which the lower receiver is which they use to track AR-15s. That's what has the serial number on the rifle in order to register the firearm. And he was like, yeah, they're modifying these things to make them automatic rifles. And in one instance, too, he was like, hey, they have AK-47 lower and upper receivers. And in which they were like, hey, the AK-47 does not have a lower and upper receiver. It's all one receiver. But anyways, so, and then they were like, these guys are a bunch of pedophiles. They are abusing children. And, of course, I don't agree with Koresh getting with a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And so they used that one as well as getting with a 14-year-old. They were like, these guys are a bunch of pedophiles and they're making automatic weapons. So the court granted them a warrant for the, breach and whatnot of Mount Caramel. And it was for February 28th, 1993 at this time. And about that time, let me stop. Prior to February 28th, they got involved with the ATF got involved with the military, and they did a fake run of the compound to where they were trying to figure out how to seize the compound without, I guess making it easy upon themselves.
Right.
That was February 27th. February 28th comes around, and the ATF decided that they were going to roll up on Mount Carmel in cattle trailers, fully kitted out, everything, whole 9 yards, armor, AR-15s, you name it. They rolled up on this motherfucker loaded. So they roll up on the compound, and they start moving towards the compound, and it is not described who is killed, or it's undecided on who shoots first. They believe that the ATF had their own dog killing team that would push up further. Yeah,
God
This is where that
damn.
comes from. I mean, they
This-
shot the,
yeah.
the dude at Ruby Ridge's dog. but
Yeah,
they,
yeah.
they just slaughtered these dogs here too. It's insane.
Yeah, they pushed. So the Ruby Ridge incident was crazy, and it made the ATF look really fucking bad, which I think we're gonna do in a next episode. You'll hear that story. That's a story about killing dogs, and leading to killing an entire
Sorry.
family.
Yeah, no, I don't mean to derail.
No, you're
but
good.
My God, that is the funniest thing in this story to me is that they're like, what we learned from Ruby Ridge is that we need to be better at killing dogs. And it's insane to me that was like the conclusion that was made.
They did not have that dog in them.
Oh,
No,
fuck.
dude, they were taking that dog out of him, and
the-
that's not what we're here for.
So the ATF had their own like squad of like a couple of guys that were just designated as the dog killers. But so the ATF is pushing up upon the compound Mount Carmel, and they push up the team to kill the dogs, which initiates. They shoot the dogs, which is I believe is most accurate to the first shot fired at Mount Carmel. Is them shooting the dogs, in which the Branch Davidians thought that they were being fired upon, and so they started firing upon the ATF. It is also believed that the Branch Davidians had a mishandling of a firearm, which resulted in a misfiring of a firearm, which caused the ATF to then start shooting at the Branch Davidians. Anyways, gunfire ensued. David was hit twice, once in the hand, once in the stomach. He was able to pull back inside the building. The building had 2 double doors, which comes into factor later. We'll talk about the double doors later. He gets back into the building, and the ATF, during the push, they are just unloading on this building. Okay, it's a big giant compound. They're unloading upon this. And a Branch Davidian by the name of Wayne Martin calls 911 like literally 5 minutes into gunfire and was like, hey, he started begging the 911 operator to tell the ATF to stop firing because there's women and children inside this building. And it can be heard on the 911 call, just gunfire. He was like, you hear that? That's not me. That is them firing upon us. And then he says, I have a legal right to defend myself and my family. And he just sticks that motherfucker out the window and opens up. In which the ATF also had 3 helicopters that were circling the building. The Branch Davidians opened up onto the helicopters, which didn't kill anybody, but it hit the helicopters a couple times. The helicopters backed off. The ATF then stormed the east side story of the compound, where Rodriguez has told the ATF that that's where the main storage of the weapons were. So they put a ladder up, walked up to the second story roof, and breached a window in which there was a Branch Davidian inside. He fired upon the ATF, hitting the first guy that was inside that came inside. Second guy shot and killed the Branch Davidian. There was a third ATF guy that was on the roof that just starts opening up inside the window.
That's the dude they shoot with the 50 cal, right?
No, they didn't shoot him. No, they just opened up on him with the ARs, because the 50 doesn't come in until later. When that's when the FBI gets involved.
My bad. I thought they shot one of the ATF dudes with the 50 cal at that window.
Not yet. So the guy that ends up getting shot goes to get out the window, hits his head on the window, falls off the roof. Okay? So they get one. It was the second guy that hit his head on the door and fell off the roof. Third guy opens up and he gets down off the roof. Then gunfire proceeded to last over 2 hours. What the media was told, that the sheriff and the ATF called for a ceasefire between the Branch Davidians and the ATF, But what is most believed is that it just took 2 hours for the ATF to run out of ammo because they were just opening up on these guys. So at this time, ATF or a federal agent is dead. So that means the FBI has to get involved. And any moment that a federal agent is killed, the ATF or the FBI has to get involved. 6 hours later, after the ceasefire, cult members were trying to bury their dead. They had a couple, I think they had 5 or 6 dead at this time. So they went outside during the ceasefire and started burying the dead. They buried the dead. And on the way back to the building, it's told by the ATF that one of the guys started firing upon the ATF agents, and so they shot back and they killed him. It is also believed that the ATF just opened up on this dude because he looked funny. I don't know. But this ensued a ceasefire, a holdout that lasted a while. And like I said before, the ATF got involved and they brought in the HRT unit, hostage response unit, or hostage rescue something. But they brought in, of course,
They're the voice of reason in this story, man.
The same crew from Ruby Ridge, including the sniper that killed the wife of the Ruby Ridge dude. So they held out for about 3 months, in which they cut the phone lines after David Koresh decided that he was going to call the press and tell them how much, how scary he was and how the ATF fired upon them first. And this gave the ATF a really bad look. Everybody was like, hey, what the fuck is this? Why are you firing upon a random ass cult? So they cut the phone line and they just directly wired the phone straight to the FBI negotiator. They also cut power and water to the building. But the Branch Davidians, being like an apocalyptic cult, they had they had a water storage and they had a food storage, so they could last out for this time. During this time, of course, the public got involved, and it practically was a fucking circus on the outside. There was T-shirts being sold. There was press trying to get close. It was like just a giant free-for-all outside this building. Until the FBI was like, hey, fuck off, and they pushed the press and everybody else back from the building. At which this time they decided they were going to roll in tanks. Bradley assault weapons, they're not tracked vehicles, they are like 6-wheeled vehicles with a cannon on top. Armor.
Do you remember when you're assaulting Burger Shot? It's not the M1 Abrams.
It's not the M1 Abrams. It is definitely 6 Days of Fallujah, the one we follow in 6 Days of Fallujah. Which is an armored personnel carrier, and they basically just started having fun with these tanks. They were just driving these things around the compound. Guys that hadn't been in a tank before, they were like, oh my god, let's ride around in a tank. And then it got to the point where they were like, all right, we can't get them out. They don't want to come out. They think, this is part of Revelations. Let's try to, psychological warfare on them. So they started at night. They would play the sounds of bunnies and chickens dying over and over again, as well as other just not nice noises, as well as turning on the spotlights on top of these Bradley assault weapons and just pointing them inside of windows. Which, of course, with a cult, with a leader that is already on edge, let's just make it worse by just sleep depriving the fuckers. So, this time goes by. David Koresh asks, he's like, I want to talk to the public. I'm not getting anywhere with the negotiators and stuff like that. But during this time, they released a couple. They're not hostages. No one was held hostage. David Koresh said, if you want to leave, you may leave. Some women, men, and children left the compound, and in which the women and men were immediately arrested. The children were held in for interrogation because, of course, the whole point of this was they thought the children were being abused and attacked during this time, so of course they're going to interrogate the children. And so later on, the time goes by, they're still holding out, and again, they're like, hey, does anybody want out? But at this time, none of the children want out because they just watched out the window at these ATF agents arrest the adults and immediately take the children away from the parents, so they don't want to leave. So this compound is full of women, children, and men at this point. So, they were using the children and interrogating them to push the whole child abuse rhetoric, which, it was found out to be false. They weren't actually, physically abusing the children. Yeah, there was some undisclosed sexual stuff that probably shouldn't have been going on with some of the children. But
David Koresh's
wife and stuff like that. But, they weren't outrightly just beating the shit out of these children. One of the David even asked, he was like, can I have a video camera? I want to show the public, what's going on in here. So they gave him a video camera, and they took a video of, everything that was going on. In one of the videos was one of the members. He was like, I am here, I'm defending my family. And he showed his family, and it was a young baby and his wife, huddled in a bed, essentially, because, that's all they had. They were huddled in a room. He was like, I'll do what I have to defend them. I'm not abusing them. You can see my child is nice and happy. My wife is taking care of the child and stuff like that. Well, they sent the video back to the ATF, and the ATF was like, nah, this supports them way too much. The public can't see this. So, of course, they didn't release it to the public. Finally, after a while, David Koresh is like, all right, I've figured it out. I am writing the seventh seal, or one of the seven seals, which is from the book of Revelations. He was like, God has told me that I am writing the book of Revelations, or one of the seals. And he was like, send me some paper and I'm going to write it. They were like, okay. They sent him some paper. We're going to write it. And he was like, give me 2 weeks and I will be finished and everyone will leave this and you can arrest us or whatever. The day before he said that to the FBI and ATF had enough. They were like, all right, fuck it. We're antsy. We're going in the next day. We're not giving them 2 weeks. We're going in the next day. So, of course, they show up with more tracked tanks, this time with tanks that can be able to breach the compound, using a special ram that can go through the walls. They rammed the walls and injected tear gas, essentially, into the building to try and get the people to come out by gassing them. Well, of course, the Branch Davidians opened up fire upon the tanks, which didn't do anything. But of course, they had kids inside, and gas masks don't fit over kids. They don't just make regular gas masks for kids. So the compound had a lower armored section that was pretty much just like a stronghold, that they were going to put the women and children in because they knew, this was the full-blown assault was coming. So a couple of the men took the women and children down to the stronghold, in which they found that whenever the tanks were moving around and destroying shit, they destroyed the door to the stronghold. So the women and children couldn't get to the stronghold. And in which, at this time, they're suffering from gas poisoning, and it isn't confirmed whether the Branch Davidians decided that they were going to use Molotov cocktails or that the ATF was just going to, whatever. A fire ensued upon Mount Carmel at this time, and the building erupted in flames. And it burnt completely down to the ground, killing everybody inside. I believe there was about 9 people that were able to get out. They snuck out through the windows and stuff. And it was said that the Branch Davidians inside were doing everything they can to try and fight the gas and fight the fire. But the ATF also didn't allow the fire department to go in and put the fire out at any point. Even after the building had collapsed upon itself, they did not let any of that. They allowed this fire to burn completely until the building was to the ground. Multiple reports said that some of the people inside had mercy killed each other, where they, shot each other and then killed themselves.
Stabbed.
Yeah, stabbed, killed. They did whatever they can. David Koresh was killed by his assistant, and then his assistant committed suicide. It's not confirmed what started the fire. There's supposedly the ATF had wired the building so they could hear inside the walls, and is reportedly that the Branch Davidians said, let's light this, let's go ahead and light this, they're going to kill us, or they were going to throw Molotov cocktails at the tanks, and it went wrong and ended up catching the building on fire. It is also found that the ATF had they had fired upon the building during the gassing, using both, of course, their assault rifles, and reported a 40 millimeter grenade launcher they had taken from the U.S. military, and they fired it upon two of the points where the fire had started. But of course, it wasn't confirmed on who started the fire.
Clap. All right, we all got a clap in there.
Yeah. All right, so you were talking about how the Branch Davidians didn't want to off themselves. It was talked about a lot that, they had all committed suicide. That was totally against what they believed. They were more of an apocalyptic fight to the end cult than they were a, hey, let's just kill ourselves cult like previous.
Yeah, this wasn't Heaven's Gate.
They weren't drinking the fancy Kool-Aid.
On the spectrum of insanity, they weren't on the particularly insane side, right?
They weren't ascends to a new level of existence type cult.
Like Revelations hippies or something. It wasn't these terribly suicidal blood and gore type of things.
So what was weird during the negotiation talks with David, with the FBI agent, it's like the FBI or the U.S. government couldn't understand that they didn't want to kill themselves. It was repeated multiple times. It was like the FBI agent was trying to say, you don't need to do this, you don't need to kill yourselves, you don't need to do all this, and it's like they couldn't understand that David was trying to tell them, we're not those guys. We're trying to fight the armies of Babylon here. We're going down in Revelations. This isn't just a suicide cult. And prior to that, the only cult that the U.S. government had ever dealt with, or at least the closest one that was brought up during the case, was Jamestown. I believe Jamestown was correct, the one where they drank the spicy lemonade, or not the spicy lemonade, Kool-Aid.
It was Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
It was in Africa, yeah.
But
or South America.
But yeah, it was brought up multiple times that this group didn't want to kill themselves, and of course, the one write-off, they said that the reason the building burnt down was because they killed themselves. That was the one explanation of the entire thing. Everyone you asked for in the U.S. government said that they set the building on fire themselves. It even goes all the way. There's even a clip of Joe Biden saying that, hey, they all killed themselves. This wasn't an act upon the ATF. They killed themselves. But
yeah, I don't know. I think somebody threw a gas grenade and it got too hot or something like that, right?
Well, not even that. You got tanks and stuff moving around, and you're poking holes in buildings. Was it not thought that, something is going to cause a spark?
Absurd.
But it was said in a court document that the tear gas they used was not flammable, and basically the only way to get it to ignite was a very extreme open flame. Well, so the tear gas that they used is one part of it is a powder, and the second part of it is an accelerant that turns it into a gas. Well, the accelerant they used was extremely flammable, and the powder shit itself was flammable as well. What did they expect when they started, tear gassing a building after they just demolished half of it? I mean, you're using tanks and firearms inside of a building.
Oh yeah, absurd and reckless and just, I don't know, terrible.
So,
At the end of the day, right? Like it killed 82 Branch Davidians, 28 of which were children, and four ATF agents died. That's all it was. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the fucking ratio on the people that are here to protect and serve?
And it's crazy because they rolled up like a full-blown military onto this group.
Oh yeah. What was it, like 800 different like feds were involved?
Yeah, and I mean,
like a small army.
These guys were just like having fun playing tanks and stuff.
Fucking terrible.
But, okay, so you brought up the 50 cal bit, okay? So the sniper from Ruby Ridge was also present at the siege, like the tear gassing moment. He was set up. He was a sniper. He was set up in the back. It was said that he fired multiple times upon the compound, and then of course, when he went to court, he said he didn't fire anything. And in order to, like, get around the ballistics, right before they were wrapping up, he changed the barrel of his sniper. He did the old swapperoonie on the barrel, so the barrel had nothing fired through it, and so they had no evidence to go off of that he had fired upon the building, because that barrel was brand new. But it was said that he fired multiple times upon the building, which I believe after, he fucking shot and killed the chick from Ruby Ridge.
He's just a psychopath in a uniform, right?
Yeah, it was more like a power trip.
I don't know. There's no, it seems like the whole thing on the side of the ATF and the FBI was just like a power trip, right?
Well, I mean,
like, here's these people doing this thing that we deem as wrong, even though there was no evidence of, like, the child thing, I guess, except for David Koresh's wife, which is its own can of worms. But that, and then the fact that they were able to, like, legally make the guns that they were in possession of is horseshit, right? Like,
yeah, they literally went through every single legal loophole to do it correctly. And the only thing the ATF went off of was, they're child abusers.
God. Well, that's what the Attorney General said, right? Like, that's the reason they got the go-ahead to go in the second time. Or was it the first time? I think it was the second time.
Yeah.
Because they were...
But
child molesters.
It was brought up in court, though. I remember from listening to part of the court hearing, was that one of the people was like, the child molestation or pedophilia is not the job of the ATF. Why was the ATF involved in a job where 2/3 of the reason they got the warrant for the initial siege was based off of their child molestation charges? Or not charges, but beliefs that they were abusing children. How the fuck does the ATF get involved in that? So there was two things that I want to bring up about the gas siege that ended in the fire. So it was told that it was told that one of the FBI agents asked one of the other FBI agents if he could go and check the building, or like go up and ask them if they had any fire extinguishers. And they went up to the building and they're like, yeah, they only have one fire extinguisher. And the guy goes, well, they should have bought fire insurance. And
that's insane.
Why are you asking that, sir? Sir, explain that. Sir, can you explain in words why you just asked that? And then earlier, supposedly they, well, not supposedly, they brought in David Koresh's grandma and a lawyer to talk to David Koresh to try to calm him down, and they thought, maybe his grandma could get him out. They talked, it didn't work, but in the midst of leaving, the lawyer said that he heard whenever he was walking away from one of the ATF agents, I hope she said her goodbyes. This is the last time she will ever see him.
That's so fucked.
It was like the ATF was out for blood. That's all they wanted. It was like a group of fucking blood-hungry fuckheads that just, saw a group of people that they could deem to the public that they were bad and just have fun with.
Absurd.
Steven, do you have anything on the court case and the later hearing?
Oh, I mean, I didn't go too in depth, right? But from what I understand, nobody on our government side really got in any notable trouble at all. Nobody got fired. Like, there were a bunch of memorials made for the 4 ATF agents that died, and everybody said they were going to try to do better, right? And then what they did was the 12 remaining Branch Davidians, they threw them in jail. they give them all kinds of things like voluntary manslaughter and using a firearm during a crime, or resisting arrest, or possessing a firearm, or whatever, right? Like, just like a bunch of fucking charges after everybody they knew just got burned inside a building to death. 6 of those 8 appealed, but they stayed in jail.
Of course. There was, I think there was like a couple of the ATF agents that were like charged for involuntary use.
There were civil suits, right? Like from the Branch Davidians, but I don't think...
Yeah, I think a couple of them might have landed in jail, but it was only based off of using weapons from the military, like using the grenade launcher, like I had said previously. Which, by the way, the ATF said whenever they used that grenade launcher that they had just used it to blow up the water tanks they had on the back of the water reservoirs. They said, yeah, we just used that to blow up the water reservoirs. Why the fuck do you need a grenade launcher to blow up a water reservoir? Why did you need to do that? What? So, the craziest, one of the crazier things, I think... Well, I hit a button. Hopefully y'all can still hear me. Alright, cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, so one of the crazier things to think on... that I brought up earlier was the doors. The door to the compound. Okay? The left side door that David Koresh initially hid behind whenever the firefight started, which was still intact after the building burned. The left side door had imprints of gunfire from both the ATF and from the outside from David Koresh firing upon the ATF after they started the fire. It was believed that this door held the facts of who fired first. And this door was loaded up by a bunch of ATF guys into a U-Haul truck and disappeared. No one was able to find it. It wasn't used in a court case. It disappeared. No one could find it. They were like, yeah, the door's gone. It's whatever.
Crazy how that happens. It's crazy how nature does that, right?
It's really weird how you just have a door disappear. It's just like on both sides, it's just a complete and utter shit show, I believe. Yeah, sure, the Branch Davidians were in the wrong for some of the things they did, but I don't believe that it should have ensued an entire firefight and pretty much a military storm of a compound. Which, speaking on a military storm of the compound, so the Branch Davidians had a flag that commemorated the Branch Davidian religion or whatever, that was flying over the compound, okay? And at the end of the fire, that flag was still standing. Well, the ATF took the flag down and put their own ATF flag up in the
That's unreal.
like in the act of a, like, you know, when a, like, let's say the military raids something. Well, when they raid something, they're gonna put their own, the, you know, the U.S. government flag up. Well, they put the ATF flag up, and, you know, showing that they had won.
What a fucking...
Like,
there's this haunting image of one of the snipers, or I think it's an FBI sniper actually, sitting in front of the burnt down building, where the corpses of the people they killed and the children lay. Like,
oh yeah, they had pictures released of the ATF agents posing with dead bodies,
Jesus.
like over the top of them, holding their rifles. You know,
like you would have, like an animal.
yeah, like they were like, oh, look at this trophy I just got. And the grounds at which, you know, after it was burned down, the grounds were disturbed. They drove tanks, they moved cars, they fucked the entire...
Every bit of evidence.
Yeah, anything a bit of evidence, they fucked it up.
They also ran over bodies with their tanks.
Yeah, they ran over that too. All right, so I have...
Yeah, and what's incredible, and just to, like, give you a peek into, like, what people felt about this whole thing, it caused the Oklahoma City bombing.
Jesus.
It is
pretty
crazy.
directly.
Yeah, Ruby Ridge and the Waco incident was one of the deals put in the transcript by the guy that caused
McVeigh, Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah, Timothy McVeigh. Fucking hell. Wow, I was reading at the bottom of this article. It says a senior FBI official told Newsweek that as many as 100 FBI agents known about the use of pyrotechnics, but no one spoke until 1999, because it was told that...
Sorry, forgot about it. My bad, guys.
Yeah, my bad. I didn't know that we used pyrotechnics whenever there was a highly flammable gas inside of a building.
My bad, homie. Jesus.
Oh, the gas that was used was CS gas. Yeah. All right, so I have an idea. All right. I want us to each give an opinion
on CS
on
gas.
what we think happened.
Okay.
How we feeling? All right. Vidith, I'm going to start with you because you talked first. I want you to just tell me what you think happened here. Like, what caused what do you think caused the fire, and why did these people all die?
I think it was all pre-planned, that they were very aware that people weren't going to survive this. Even beforehand, with some of the comments where you're talking about with, you know, it's the last time they'll speak again, or they only have one fire extinguisher, with somebody getting sent in days before to see how many fire extinguishers they have, to having vehicles that can puncture holes into the building, to bringing a grenade launcher, to something like this that could have just been a normal raid or a notice that ended up being an entire fucking invasion of their compound. I think that it was purposeful, and it was set out with malicious intent. And if it was, you know, either a Molotov, or if it was somebody had lit something with one of the grenade launchers, I know that some of it's like very obscure. I personally think that they launched a grenade launcher and it just set aflame and burned the whole compound down. I don't think either of them were right. Like, they both done pretty fucked shit. Like, they're not both fucking angels in this story. But
oh yeah, no.
But I don't think that they deserve to die in such a horrific way, especially with the women and kids and choking to death on CS gas. It's just and people should be fucking brought to the fullest extent of the law and be punished. But I don't know if it's gonna happen.
We'll probably never. We're probably past that. Steven? Give me your thoughts. I want to hear it.
I mean, I think, like, there's something to be said about how, like, the people in those teams on the ATF and the FBI are trained, right? Like, if it has been habitualized into you to, like, act fast, shoot first, ask questions later, save the hostage, whatever, and then you put them in a situation where they aren't really hostages, and nobody is really trying to kill anybody, at least to begin with, and then you bring these violently aggressive people into it and say, you know, fucking go nuts. We heard a rumor that they're touching kids or whatever. Go ham, egg, and cheese. This is exactly what happens, right? Like, people in that position just, like, go way too far, like, every time. And of course, the fact that they had like absurd equipment like tanks and grenade launchers, as you were saying, is like is certainly excessive. I don't think you need that to like start a fire. I don't even think you have to deliberately start a fire. I just figure they thought like, you know, maybe we're gonna shoot them all or have a big gunfight or whatever. That could be why they were saying that. You know, those two while uh, the grandma was walking away or whatever. Um, but yeah, no, they definitely started that fire deliberately, whether it was a mass conspiracy to like show force or whatever, or just some guy who was going a little too far and thought he was gonna, you know, be a GI Joe or some bullshit. I don't know what goes through the power trip there, but I think it was deliberate either through like the system that put them in that place to begin with, or you know, maybe a plan. I'm not so big on the whole like it was planned that we're gonna burn it down or whatever.
Fair.
I do believe that there was some type of they knew that they were gonna end up killing everybody inside it. They just didn't know how they were gonna go about it. So I do like your idea of it's not fully. This is a weird way to explain it. It's not fully blaming the ATF agents because they were like so like gung ho and gun happy, but like still, I mean they instituted it. They were the ones that brought it upon themselves. Do I believe that the Branch Davidians themselves actually set fire to the place? No, it's not what they wanted. It could have come down to the fact of there is talks that they wanted to make Molotov cocktails to throw them at the tanks. Let's say there was an accidental, like, whenever they lit one of those Molotov cocktails, it did something with the gas, it caught the building on fire. Yeah, sure, but I don't believe that it was their intent to set the building on fire. I believe that it was an intent to attack the ATF agents who had just, attacked their building with no notice. Well, okay, so there was a notice. They did tell the Branch Davidians that morning, hey, this is it. You're going down one way or another. Either you walk out of this place or, we're coming in. And the Branch Davidians basically told him, we're not done. Or David Koresh, yeah, basically come and take it. David Koresh basically said, "I'm not done writing one of my seals. You got to give us more time." And the ATF and the FBI were like, "All right, let's raid this motherfucker." But no, I do not believe that any side was in the right here. The Branch Davidians being, it's said that yeah, sure, the adults were at the wrong, but why punish the kids? And that's a big thing too that I don't agree with is, the one thing the US government has always pushed for is, yeah, sure, the adults are in the wrong, but why are we punishing the kids? And they did nothing but punish the kids. And then in this instant, whether it goes from interrogating them as soon as they got out of the compound to them burning alive inside of a building. It just feels like there was nothing done in order to even help the kids in this instance, even when the main prerogative of this raid was to save the kids and to save them from this abuse, and they just they really fumbled the bag when it comes to that. I don't.
No, they never give a shit to begin with, right? Like that was just justification for escalation.
All they wanted to do was try and make themselves look better after the whole Ruby Ridge incident where they killed those people, because after the Ruby Ridge incident, the public was calling for the abolishment of the ATF and the government.
Yeah,
there was a couple of people that were like, "Fuck the government, get them all out." But so they were like, "All right, we got a bunch of pedophiles inside this building. Let's push the pedophile rhetoric, and we'll make ourselves look good." And they fucking fumbled the shit out of that one too. And it's just, I don't know. This group didn't want to kill themselves. They wanted to fight to the end. And I mean, even before then, they didn't want fighting to begin with. They didn't need to be provoked. There was no need for this. It was told that
there's a certain percentage of crazy people at the end of the day, right? And like, if they're not harming anybody, isn't that the whole point of the whole freedom being free thing, right?
Right.
Or like, not, sorry, that came out in not quite the right words. Freedom is not free and all that jazz. But, like, what's the point of sitting here? I don't know. I just get really bothered with the overstep of power, just so blatant, and then the bullshit that we're just gonna lie about it to make it seem better is just insane to me, right? Like, these should be people in trusted positions of authority, and then at some point now it's just sociopaths, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, sure that the religion was kind of like out of whack. Like, their religion was a little far. They, David Koresh thought he was the second coming of Messiah, and all the other, like, even like Vidith talked about earlier, where, they went through multiple leader changes and deaths upon that for David Koresh to be even. Yeah. Killed the dude with an axe. But still, it's like, what was our country founded upon? It was the right of freedom of religion. Yeah, sure. The only thing is I can't push the freedom of religion whenever the fact that this guy was going for underage children too. It's a very weird edge to. Oh God, it's a very weird edge to be upon, because one side you're defending a guy that got with an underage woman, the other one you're pushing a government that pushed way too hard upon itself. So, I mean, it's a lose-lose in all things.
No, it's definitely not a lose-lose, right? Like, we have, like, a court system and laws and a fair trial, right? Like,
no, you're correct.
That's not the FBI fucking burning you and all your buddies alive. Jesus.
Yeah, no, you're correct. This could have been gone out. I mean, even with how, like, docile the group was. Let's say there was accusations.
No, well, like, okay, you want to talk just like, I'm sorry, real quick.
No,
I
just
want
keep
to
going.
say something before it goes too far. We funded the Manson cult and gave them the LSD and the brainwashing and the incredible will to just go murder Sharon Tate and those people.
Man.
Yeah, we did that. That was the CIA. And so when there's an organic one that's not us and is not violent, you kill it. It's insane.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this group, yes, they had accusations against children. Yes, I don't agree with it, but still the group was non-violent. This situation could have been solved in so many different ways that didn't need the firefight that ensued. Let's say, a couple of the ATF guys show up and let's bring in the sheriff, because the sheriff is trusted among David Koresh. They've met him multiple times. They were good friends with him. Let's bring him in.
There was a relationship there.
Yeah, let's bring that sheriff in. Let's bring a couple ADF agents in. They're like, hey, we have a couple questions for you. Can you please come, answer the questions? Let's go to a trial. Let's do all of that. Because it was told multiple times that David Koresh even told the ATF, please, come look inside my building. Please, come find something. There is nothing. I am open. You can have all of this. Y'all can come look through all of this. Y'all don't have to hide. Y'all don't have to do any of that. Come in here and look. He was like, we're not holding, weapons of mass destruction. We're not holding, full-blown automatic assault rifles. We're not doing any of that. We're doing, within the legal limits of creating firearms and distributing firearms, which, I mean, shit is, fuck. We're looking at our Second Amendment here.
Yeah, the right to bear arms.
Well, I mean, there's the excellent quote: "Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms should be like the name of a chain store, not a fucking government Agency."
Well, I mean, what is the main purpose of the ATF? let's think about this one for a second. So it's brought up that the ATF is just basically a branch of the IRS. Because let's say, all right, me, man, I want to go out.
Imagine if you fucked up your taxes and an IRS audit included people wearing guns.
Oh my god. But like, okay, let's say I myself wanted to own an automatic assault rifle. Okay, it is not illegal. At least, in this instance, it is not illegal. The only way that makes it illegal is if you do not pay your taxes correctly. There is a whole ass there's a whole ass tax stamp that you pay for automatic firearms. And so they're just a branch of the IRS. They're just looking for more money. But anyways, I'll get off my soapbox about the ATF and the IRS. Matthew, if you would.
Sure.
Close this out real quick.
All right, you guys all done with your talking points?
I got all mine.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for joining us for this seemingly longer episode of Barking Boys Episode 3 podcast. Hope you enjoyed the listen and it had a little provocative thought and you maybe got something out of it. Thank you all for stopping by, joining us, and we will see you next time on, we'll see what subject, but it might have been dropped already, so we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.